Hey guys, this week Bradley Cooper opened up in an interview about how he struggled with mental health, depression, self-esteem, and addiction to cocaine. So in this video, I'm gonna summarize the 9 tips that he gave that I think we could all benefit from, that helped him turn his life around, and how, ordinary people could apply it to their lives. So before we dive into those 9 tips, my goal is to put out 1 new video a week on mental health tips and tricks and topics in psychology. So if that interests you, then hit the subscribe and notification button. The first thing that Bradley touches on is to have at least one good friend or friends around that can support you, that have your honest goals and intentions in mind.
The fact that Will, they call it your Eskimo. Will is the reason he took that risk of having that hard conversation with me.
Bradley said that the whole thing that led him to re-examine his life and turn his life around, get out of this depression, was one of his best friends sitting down with him and being honest and confronting him, not in an attacking way, but just said, "Hey, Bradley, man, you're being a real a-hole the other night, and I've noticed that a lot in you lately, and this isn't you. What's going on here?" And Bradley said that one good friend pulling him aside and kind of giving him a good check-in to reevaluate prompted him to turn his life around. Tip number 2 that Bradley talked about was to stop trying to fit in and just be yourself.
Was it because you were trying to, quote, fit in? And that's,
Yeah,
like you
of
said,
course.
yeah.
I mean, zero self-esteem.
Bradley explained that he had been trying to do this whole comedy shtick called mean comedy because that's what was popular in Hollywood at the time. So Bradley thought, okay, if I just do this mean comedy style, then I'll get popular. But it really backfired because, again, people just saw him as being a real a-hole, and that wasn't who they knew Bradley to genuinely be. So instead, Bradley realized this wasn't him, and he started doing movies about things that he was really passionate in, that was just his style. And he went on to make that amazing movie with Lady Gaga. He's working on a movie now about the famous composer Leonard Bernstein, just because that's a story that Bradley thinks is really cool and passionate about. Tip number 3 he talked about was to stop putting other people down.
There was a good year where all I did was try to access mean humor, only out of insecurity in hopes that people would think I'm funny.
Bradley was developing this mean persona of being an a-hole and using it for comedy. But it wasn't getting him anywhere, and he talks about how he shifted to just being kind and respectful of everyone he was around instead. So now when he directs movies and he's on the set, he treats everyone from the bottom, say for example like a janitor, all the way up to the other most famous movie star on the set. He treats them the same, and he treats them with respect. And I think this can definitely make us happier in our own lives, just treating other people with kindness. Really successful people that actually compliment and lift other people up around them. Tip number 5 is work with a therapist. Bradley said this was key to really helping him work through the depression, the addiction, some of the struggles he was dealing with.
Working with a new therapist. And quite honestly, today I can sit in front of you saying I actually do have self-esteem.
He said that working with a therapist was great because he was able to speak his thoughts out loud to someone, really reflect on his past, and the therapist helped him assess what he was telling himself that was true and accurate and helpful, and what was really holding him back. He says that he started talking with a good therapist about 1.5 years ago when he was 45 years old, and that is really what shifted his perspective. So I'm sure he wishes he saw a therapist when he was younger, but he waited till he was age 45. It's okay, it's never too late. He's grateful now that he did. Tip number 6 actually came from Bradley's friend in the interview, Will Arnett. I think he's another famous actor, comedian, but Will Arnett explained to stop blaming other people and stop having a victim mentality.
It's not everybody else, it's me.
It's easy to look around the world, right, and say, oh, it's other people's fault. Like, why are they being so mean to me? Why is the world so tough and cruel, right? But Will Arnett said, it takes courage to kind of realize and consider, wait, is everyone else the problem? Or maybe admitting that some of it is I am the problem. What ways am I looking at the world and kind of holding myself back? Because everyone is their own worst enemy a lot of the time. Tip number 7 is focus on the family. And Bradley talked so much about how being a father completely changed his life around.
Fatherhood is, everything changed.
He said that having children, having a family was always a goal for him. And it wasn't until he met his wife and had his children that he had a purpose greater than himself, right? So his life shifted from being selfish, everything is about himself, to selfless. Now he's living for his kids. Tip number 8 is to cherish the small moments, the everyday moments that bring you joy.
She's like, okay, daddy. And I'm just like, this is the greatest moment of my life.
Bradley talked about one day he was at home and he looked over and his daughter yelled at him and made some joke. She was trying to be potty trained, and their eyes met and they just both laughed, and they both just had this joyous, funny little moment. And Bradley said, like, this is the best moment in my life. How does it get better than this? Like, I'm just sharing a laugh with my daughter, and nothing gets better than this. But that was just a small, everyday moment. Tip number 9 that Bradley talked about was to change the story that you're telling yourself.
I found myself telling me and myself and others a narrative about certain things. My childhood, my relationship to my parents, like this thing, press play. I'm a kid from Philly. I got a chip on my shoulder. It's like, I'm always going to look up. It's whatever it is. And eventually you're like, actually, what is the truth?
I think this is the most important tip. So Bradley said that growing up, I guess he didn't really have a good childhood. He talked about he viewed himself as this kid from Philly who had a chip on his shoulder and that he was worthless. He actually kept telling himself and believing that he was worthless. And this led him to have low self-esteem. And this was the story that Bradley was telling himself, I guess. And he said that really held him back. But I think after going into therapy, he said he was able to change his story around, where now he looks at what the facts actually are, is that he's been really successful. He's a successful actor, director. He's had many successful movies. So why would he continue to tell himself this story of, I'm a nobody kid from Philly, And I think we could all see how we maybe get stuck in a negative story that we're telling ourselves about our past. But what we want to do is stop telling ourselves the negative story and really rewrite the story that we want to tell ourselves. And that's going to become a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? If we just focus on the successes that we've had.
Whatever story you're telling about yourself is the way that your life is going to go.
All right, guys, so those were the 9 mental health tips that Bradley Cooper gave in his interview that I thought we could all apply to everyday life. So let me know in the comments if you could relate to any of those, if you're a Bradley Cooper fan, what you think. I think it's really great that celebrities are coming out and sharing their struggles with us because, again, it shows that everyone deals with this. And no matter how much money or fame you get, mental health touches us all. Take care, guys. I'll see you next time.
And that was like the first time I ever realized I had a problem with drugs and alcohol.
Oh.
And it was Will saying that to me. And I'll just never forget it.